All right, ready to go when you are.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
He's so
Hello,
cute.
Oh. I went on a wee ride. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tea and Lit. Today's video is going to be a discussion between my brother and I about William Shakespeare's Othello, so be sure to grab yourselves a cuppa and a copy, and let's get into today's video. So a little bit of background. My brother and I started this YouTube channel to discuss great works of classic literature, including but not limited to the great works of William Shakespeare. I was really excited when we started this project to head straight into Othello. It is a favorite play of mine, and I don't know if, Brigadier Keith, you've read it yet.
Before this time, no, I had not read Othello.
Okay. So that's very exciting that we got to read this together. We're just gonna sit here and talk. I've got a list of a bunch of questions, about 15 questions that we're going to talk about the play. And so I hope you guys all have a warm beverage to enjoy, and we're gonna have a little chat. So my first question is, what were your first thoughts and favorite parts of the play?
My favorite part is definitely when Iago is really getting into Othello's head. That whole conversation was very well written, and just you can see the descent into madness that he's able to instill in Othello throughout that whole section.
Which is kind of a trope you enjoy across mediums.
Oh yeah, anime, manga. I guess it was technically the same things.
Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Marvel Cinematic Universe. Television, books, everything. Everyone loves a good descent into madness. It's way more interesting.
Do you feel that reflects something within you, that's something that you are attracted to, that you are in a perpetual state of descent into madness?
No comment.
I plead the fifth.
This will not be used against me in the court of law.
I think my favorite part of the play was, the whole of the second half of Act 4 and all of Act 5. I really love how Othello has to figure out how he's going to murder his wife, and that whole thing about Desdemona and her murder. I really just love how all of that kind of played out. But I love darkness, and so one of the reoccurring themes that you may see on our channel is that I love a good murder.
I mean, you were commenting on that when we were actually reading it originally. You were talking about how, him trying not to ruin her face was a huge aspect of him trying to figure out
how he wanted to kill her.
Yeah. Romantic murders are the best kind of murders. Everyone knows that.
I think so. All right. So how has Shakespeare been ahead of his time? That's something that we hear people say all of the time, really.
Yeah, he's definitely more progressive even back then, We have stuff now that we can't even remotely touch on some of the subjects that he did with the random prejudices that he would write about.
Right. So, I mean, I was watching this PBS documentary, and it was talking about, they asked the question, were there black people in Elizabethan England? And apparently there were, but a lot of them were like foreign dignitaries. And so the figure that they think inspired Othello was a North African dignitary that was around London at the time, that at first was really popular with the locals, and then eventually some people decided that he didn't really belong there anymore. So it was kind of interesting to see how a real life historical event of this diplomatic visit could have inspired Shakespeare's Othello.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Having the actual historical aspects of it definitely changes your opinion on the works itself.
Yeah. So black actors haven't been able to play the role. The first black actor to play in England was in, I think, the 17th century, and he was called a genuine N-word by reviewers, and he could only play the role for 2 nights before being kicked off stage and sent back to the United States, I think is where he was from. And he was the only one for a long time, and then it wasn't until the late 20th 20th century that a black actor was able to play Othello on stage. So I would just love to know, like, how do you think that impacts black people in the arts, but also is a commentary on our larger society's view of black people?
You said it wasn't until the 20th century that we were able to consistently have a black person playing
Yeah, I think it was like
Othello.
the 80s. Like we
The
had color TV.
80s?
Yeah, it was like the 70s or the 80s. Like
Oh
the
my
guy is
god.
alive. So the PBS special I watched, he was the one who did the Othello thing, and he did not look that old.
That
Like
is...
he did. I wouldn't even say he looked old. He was probably in his 50s.
Whoa.
Yeah, like super
that's,
late.
that's really,
I
really
mean, like our
messed up.
parents were alive the first time Othello was played on stage by a black man.
Yeah, I would definitely say that makes things a lot harder for the audience to really be able to retain any lesson that they're trying to get across in the art piece, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And the thing that I thought was interesting is that, there's been Othello movies. Anthony Hopkins played Othello in blackface, is basically what they had to do. So the BBC did several Othello renditions for film, and they basically had white actors in blackface to do the films.
Yeah, that's... I'm surprised that they were still okay with it even at that time, actually. But, times change rapidly, but not that rapidly, I guess.
Does it change your view of like a favorite actor of yours, Anthony Hopkins, at all?
No, because I would still argue. I guess I'd have to see it if I'm being honest. Uh, I think the biggest problem with blackface is when it was specifically used as this form of oppression, and it was very specifically meant to insult black culture. But I can't imagine. Like, I read Othello. Nothing in Othello is really offensive towards black people. So I can't imagine Anthony Hopkins' interpretation was offensive. But I'd have to see it to be sure. I don't want to weigh in on that too much. But uh, it just goes right back to being able to actually properly present it. Like, look at RDJ in Tropic Thunder, Like, he's doing blackface in that film, but it's really funny. So what am I
Yeah,
gonna
so
do?
we tolerated it. Yeah. And I think for me, I would take a greater offense to the casting of the film more than I would take offense to the actors in the film.
Yeah,
Just,
that's true.
you know, you can't help the roles that people have determined those sorts of things. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's the casting director who said, "Oh no, we should definitely have a white person." But it's one of those things that is good to talk about because that I feel in so many circumstances white people just don't understand some of the like underlying issues of black culture that they don't even know exist. So if you're Anthony Hopkins in the 70s playing Othello, well of course you are because nobody plays black people in Shakespeare plays, even if it is Othello. You haven't seen it literally since the 17th century, and it was only for 2 nights when that happened. And so it's one of those things that, like, people may not realize is a problem until someone says, hey, this is a problem. You should have black actors playing black characters. And we have this problem now. Cindy with the Books, I think is her YouTube channel name. She's talking about how they're trying to do a Last Airbender series on Netflix and how there is a great challenge. Tell me how you feel. No, there's a great challenge when you're trying to do things for minorities. And I guess the Last Airbender movie did really poorly, but they had a bunch of white people playing these Asian characters. And
it's
there
also
are enough
written
Asian
terribly.
people in the world that you can cast Asian people to be Asian characters. And there's enough black people in the world that you can cast black people to be black characters. And I think it's really amazing that we've just now started to see this, where black actors and actresses or Asian actors and actresses are able to play these roles and have it be necessary. If you're going to produce these sorts of films or TV shows, you need to be mindful of your casting, and you can't just whitewash it and call it good. In the same way that, like, would we have a little bit of a problem if it were the reverse? If there was a clearly white character played by a Hispanic person, would that bother us?
Yeah, definitely goes in all the different directions. I would say both ways, but there's a lot of different directions it could go in. Uh, we gotta, we're definitely getting more progressive as time goes on, but until we're actually able to get everybody to actually do jobs for themselves, it's going to be a struggle continually.
Which is really sad. And I'm glad that socially that's something that we are working towards.
Yeah, for sure.
And because like I said, I'm sure there are plenty of talented actors and actresses of Asian descent who would love to be part of The Last Airbender on Netflix if they decided to do that.
Last Airbender's sick, but I feel like the live action version is probably gonna suck again. I just throwing that my hard
But-
read is gonna suck again.
what does the play teach us today about racial injustice? We've sort of touched on this.
Yeah, we did already talk about that a little bit, but I guess just the fact that with the example of a character like Iago, they don't even really give a reason in the book for him to hate Othello. It's just sort of heavily implied that it's a racist thing, right? I mean, I don't even say heavily implied. It's just that it's implied because he's black. That's the only like explanation you really get for the way Iago feels about Othello, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree that Iago is racist and that's the problem. I think Iago's just crazy, but I did see it with Brabantio, which I think I'm going to where is written on here about Brabantio, because it was the only time in the play that somebody else brought up Othello's race was in that first act, when Brabantio finds out that his daughter has married Othello, and the Duke says to him, my favorite line, oh no, that's not it. The Duke says to him something like, your son-in-law is far more fair than black because he has, articulated and wooed this fine Venetian woman with his tales of woe. And I quite love that. If virtue no delighted beauty lack, your son-in-law is far more fair than black. And that's really the first time that we see, and I think maybe the only time, that someone else brings up Othello's race. All the other times we see it, it's him bringing up his race about himself.
Yeah, I think Brabantio is definitely racist because he's the only one that really comments on it directly. I know you said that you think Iago was just kind of chaos incarnate and just trying to influence the course of action there. I can agree with that. I almost feel like that's the idea of the comparison, though, is the fact that Iago doesn't make sense in his hatred, and that's racism in a nutshell. Is that it just doesn't make sense. It just kind of exists.
That's a good point. Racism is inherently illogical.
Yeah.
That leads to the next question. What is Iago's motivation? I think Iago's a psychopath. That's my assessment.
Yeah,
he's just an agent of chaos.
Yeah, I would definitely think that his motivations are never clearly stated, and I kind of like the idea that he really is just an agent of chaos. I think that's a lot more of like a fun way of going through it. The implication by the people that have read it before us are, of course, that he's racist. But I like the idea that it's more of this, just the symbol of the fact that he doesn't have a logical reason. He just does.
Mm-hmm. I do like that. That deeper meaning that you've come up with that I hadn't considered. Next question: does Iago have a clear plan, or is he just improvising? Is he picking it up as he goes along?
He seems pretty confident every time he gives another part of his plan to like Rodrigo. So maybe he really did have the whole thing thought up months, years ago. He's been just sitting on this for a while. Rodrigo finally shows up as his patsy, and he's like, "All right, I got this. I got my plan finally coming to fruition."
I feel like he probably had an outline, but I don't know if he had a full plan until a little bit later after the handkerchief incident. I'm looking for a quote here. He says something along the lines of, every way makes my gain, because he's put all the pieces together. The handkerchief was like the last thing, and there's no way for him to lose now.
What do you think his plan would have been if he never got the handkerchief?
I don't know.
Because he did start it before he had that in his possession.
He did.
If that didn't go according to plan, I wonder what would have happened.
Yeah. I can't
like
find this
5
quote.
less dead characters.
And maybe the characters that ought to be dead would be the ones that are dead.
Yeah.
Act 5, Scene 1, line 15. Every way makes my gain. So he's set up all of these players that no matter how the chips fall, he's the winner. And if you haven't read the play, he is. Sort of. I mean, he's one of the few that makes it. Next question.
Does anyone
Does
really
Iago...
win in Shakespeare?
Nobody wins in Shakespeare, that's true. Does Iago know Othello better than Othello knows himself? I thought that was a really interesting thing that came up in the series. Does Iago know Othello better than Othello knows himself? I kind of feel like you do. If you allow an enemy into your mind to just kind of like stick a dagger into your whole life, right? He loved Desdemona. And for him to be manipulated so clearly shows a lack of self-awareness and an awareness of your enemy, I think. For you to not like step out and say, why am I so worked up about this? Because this was an easy problem. You just go to Desdemona and say, hey, babe, are you sharing a bed with my best friend? No? Okay. And then separately, you go to your best friend and say, hey, are you sharing a bed with my wife? You know, I feel like it's not that hard, but at no point in the play does anyone even talk about it other than with Iago.
Yeah. Iago plays the middleman for all of it. And I think that's actually the best example of how Iago has a better understanding of the other characters than probably any of the other characters have an understanding of Iago, because they call him Honest Iago, or at least Othello does, and that's just
several times.
Yeah, he calls him. Yeah, he has the utmost trust in Iago, and Iago has the utmost just disdain for him to be able to even try something like this. I would definitely say Iago knows Othello better, not only because of that, but also because he is able to get the jealousy, riled up in him. I don't know if you've ever seen. I only think of high school because I don't deal with people doing this in real life. But in high school, people will try to get other people jealous, other people angry, or whatever.
Yes.
They bait you, right? They try to bait you into feeling a certain emotion, and if you let that happen, that person understands how your brain works better than you do, and that's not okay. You can't just let someone take control over your own emotions like that. It's not a healthy way to go through life.
No, it's not. And so I think one of the things that we all need to learn, I'm sorry, I'm just adjusting myself a little bit here, that we all need to learn is the skills of self-mastery, to know, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And for Othello to have said, you know what, I'm getting worked up about this thing my friend is saying. I don't really know it's true. It's all hearsay. So he says, Cassio put his leg over my thigh and kissed me. And yeah. I mean, come on now. And that's an easy thing to check up on. Is Cassio sleeping in the same place Iago is? Why is Iago sleeping in Cassio's place when Iago has a wife, Emilia, and we can find out that Cassio has a girl, Bianca? So what is the likelihood that these two men are lodging together when they both have women in other places? And that's one of those easy things that you can check up on very, very quickly. And if he had just, I think Othello knows Rodrigo. If he had said to Rodrigo, hey, what do you think is going on here? Rodrigo could have been like, well, Iago's trying to separate you and your wife is what's trying to happen here so that I can get with Desdemona. It's like, oh, okay, maybe honest Iago is not so honest.
Yeah, they say hindsight is 20/20. I think dramatic irony is 20/20.
Yes, dramatic irony. Next question is that Brabantio question. What impact do you think Brabantio has on Othello and Desdemona?
I think it definitely starts Othello thinking about Desdemona having the capacity to lie or the capacity to be deceitful. Even though it's not said that she just directly lies to her father or anything. She just fell in love, got married. Oh, she does get married without him, doesn't she? Actually, never mind. So I guess even more so. Then yeah, it just starts to get Othello nervous about the fact that she can be like that. Maybe she's like that with me too.
I did a lot of research about interracial relationships. I was thinking about doing a What I've Learned video, but I don't know if we'll have time for that. And one of the things that I thought was obvious is that they've done research about the racism of parents impacting the level of happiness in a relationship of an interracial couple. And so, and also I also did some reading on like the insecurities of minorities involved in interracial relationships. And so I wonder, even in our modern day, this is reflected, but Othello, knowing what Barbanchio's opinion is of him as a black man, impacted his lack of self-esteem within his own relationship, because as I said, Barbanchio is the only one who brings up his race, other than Othello, and it's brought up in Act 1, and then we see it a couple of times throughout the play where Othello mentions his skin color as a point of challenge. He has one monologue, I think, in Act 3 or 4, where he says something like, well, I'm not like these great statesmen with their he doesn't say vocabularies, but with their fine speaking, and here I am, just, lowly little Othello. And it's a moment that kind of breaks your heart, because it seems like he's saying, I'm not worthy of the fair Desdemona because I am a Moor.
Yeah.
And I think that is first introduced very subtly by Shakespeare in Act 1 via Barbanchio.
Yeah, I do. I can definitely see that. I think that's interesting that you said about the racism of the parents sort of influences that relationship, um, because you can definitely see that even now, right? That the parents that disapprove of the kids' relationships, and then that sort of just is now ingrained in the back of their head and is always just kind of lying in wait to ruin the relationship in some way, you know.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. Uh, would the play have been the same if Othello was from Venice? So one of the things that I was looking at in my research is that part of the way that Iago finesses the situation is by saying, I'm from Venice, I know the Venetian ways, and Othello, being from North Africa, doesn't. And so if he had been even a black man from Venice, would he have said, well, I understand the politics of this situation a little bit better. I understand the personalities involved in this situation a little bit better. Do you think it would have changed some things if he was from Venice? And even would Brabantio have been a little bit more affectionate towards him if he was from Venice?
I'm sorry. Is Iago's argument that if you're from Venice, you're more likely to lie? Is that is that what
Yes,
he's saying?
yes. All the
Oh,
world's
okay.
liars are in Venice. They're born
Everyone
and
knows that.
raised
Yeah.
in Venice. Yes.
You don't ask them; they won't admit it. But
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah. I don't know. I feel like I don't think it would really change much, but I mean, if that's the argument that Othello is able to sort of get into, then fine, I guess. I guess politics in Venice is lying, and if you're not from it, if you're not from Venice, you're not as good as of a liar. So what are you
Yes.
gonna do?
I just want to say, if there is anyone from Venice, we are being sarcastic. So no, please don't take offense.
Yeah.
We feel really bad that your city is underwater. Is
I
it
mean, it was
Venice?
cool for a while. It was cool for a while.
Is it
Now
Venice
it's
that's sinking?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. I suddenly lost all confidence in myself. Um, do you think that Iago is intelligent or Othello is gullible?
I think Othello is gullible because again, he allows someone else to play his emotions so easily, and I just don't approve of that. I don't know if I could really say Iago's that intelligent because his plan doesn't really work out as well as it should have. And you know what? I would definitely say Othello's gullible. I think Othello's definitely gullible. I don't think Iago's that smart though.
I agree. It's not like he being Iago did anything super groundbreaking in starting rumors and lying
Yeah,
to people. Like that's not anything super clever at all.
yeah.
How do you think that the friendships compare in the story? So we've got the friendships between Emilia and Desdemona, and we've got the friendships between Othello and Iago. How do you think those two friendships compare to one another?
Well, Othello and Iago is definitely like a fake friendship, of course, right? Othello thinks it's real, but Iago obviously isn't invested in it. And going off of that, Emilia and Desdemona, they have true affection for one another. even to the point where when Amelia, you know, is worried about her own death, she wants to be with Desdemona too when she
Right.
dies. You know,
Right.
so I would definitely say that they're more honest. You know, they're more connected. Uh, I don't know. I just think Iago is not the kind of person I'd ever want to be invested in. You know.
You're not a person I'm gonna keep in my circle.
Yeah, but like it's funny because he even puts on like you only get to see a couple of interactions where he's with a group. You know, he's usually one on one with people, and then brain ninjaing them.
Like
But
Littlefinger.
like Littlefinger. But there's that one scene where when they're all arriving by boat, and he's immediately they guise it as sarcasm, but he's clearly just being an asshole. He's clearly
Yeah,
just
yeah.
being cruel to his own wife. You know,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I, I don't know. I don't even really like people that would just be like that all the time, anyways, because you can't trust them in the first place.
Yes, that was the beginning of Act 2, and I wrote down one of the things he said that really stuck with me. He said, "You rise to play and go to bed to work," and in reference to women's roles in the society, that you during the daytime you're out drinking with your friends having a nice time, but in the evening your husbands have needs and it is your responsibility to meet those needs. He also says in a line that we are putting on a t-shirt, "For I am nothing if not critical," which I find golden.
You know what just occurred to me? Maybe honest Iago wasn't actually a compliment. It's just a reference to the fact that he's an asshole all
Yes, yes.
the time.
Honest, that's what we're gonna call it. What we
Yeah.
mean is you're not fun to be around. I agree with what you said, that there seems to be a very authentic relationship between Amelia and Desdemona, which is so odd considering women don't know how to be friends. But you can tell that they do love each other very much, and that Iago and Othello. It seems that Othello loves Iago, but Iago doesn't love anybody, not even his own wife.
I think thou dost. That's what he
I think
says.
thou dost. I loved that line. I loved that line. How can we learn from the character's vulnerabilities? So when I wrote this question down, I was thinking about Cassio in, I think it was Act 3. Like, he knows he can't drink, and yet he gives into the peer pressure of Iago, and that gets him into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Iago seems to play off of everybody's vulnerabilities pretty well. Um, for one, Cassio's drinking thing. For two, Othello's sort of gullibility. For three, Emilia's love for him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like he really is just playing off of everybody pretty easily, and I think he knows that he can't play everybody because he doesn't know the vulnerabilities of everybody. Even when
Yeah,
it comes to like Desdemona, he understands that like her affection for Othello means that he can't play the opposite side, right? He can't
right.
try to trick her.
That's exactly what I was going to say also, is that he never plays Desdemona because she, like, what's her vulnerability, because she's very
Yeah,
dedicated to her
yeah.
husband, and she seems to be a pretty honest young lady, minus that minor issue of not inviting her father to her wedding, but for the most part she
You
she
know.
doesn't seem to be a character with a whole lot of um, exploitable flaws, and so he just doesn't go after her at all.
Yeah, I think that puts more emphasis on the fact that he's really not that smart. I mean, he's smart enough to figure out the vulnerabilities, I guess, but he's not such a genius that he could outsmart someone who doesn't have very glaring flaws in the series. You know.
Agreed. How do the relationships compare? So Othello and Desdemona, Iago and Amelia.
I mean, I already said before, but the fact that Iago is blatantly just very rude to Amelia and Desdemona, even in that scene, whereas like Othello is like very like affectionate towards Desdemona for sure. At least until all the jealousy starts to take root. Um, and I think both women really trust their man in this equation by like a lot, because the fact that Amelia gets the
Maybe
handkerchief,
too much.
yeah, yeah, the fact that she gets the handkerchief that obviously means so much to Desdemona and Othello, and she should know because she did. I don't know if she heard the whole story. I don't know if it's blatantly told to us or not. But if she's with Desdemona, I can't imagine she didn't realize how important the handkerchief was to her. And she just takes it, gives it to her man
Yeah.
without even really thinking much of it. And then again, Desdemona is still on her deathbed singing Othello's praises. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree that I feel like both wives are very loving towards their husbands. I did love the one scene where Amelia and Desdemona are talking, and Desdemona says, not by this heavenly light would I ever dream of cheating on my husband. And Amelia says, maybe not by heavenly light, but I would do it just as much in the dark, which I just thought was so funny. And she goes in, she has quite the monologue, discussing the circumstances in which a wife may stray. And so I think that the marriage, obviously, resulted in both of them being dead. I think that the relationship between Othello and Desdemona is stronger. But the thing that I find so interesting even in that is that Othello kills Desdemona and then dies by suicide, not wanting to live in a world without her. And Iago kills his wife and says, well, I'm taking a vow of silence now.
Yeah.
And it's like their relationship was clearly toxic, and Othello and Desdemona's really wasn't. And it had its issues, obviously, but it was like it had one issue. There were not layers of issues. We see from Act 2, as soon as Amelia's introduced, we see strife in that marriage. But she remains committed to this man who does not care about anything or anyone.
Yeah, it actually almost begs the question if there was ever any real affection between them ever,
Yeah.
Amelia and Iago, or if it was more of like a marriage of convenience or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unlike Desdemona and Othello, which is clearly a marriage of passion, if anything.
Right. Agreed. Agreed. Who do you think is the biggest victim of the story?
Ooh. Uh, I kind of want to say Cassio, if I'm being honest.
That's what I said. I said Cassio.
Okay, but he still lives, right? He still
He
makes it to
does.
the end.
He does.
Uh, Here, I'll think of someone else because there's a lot of options for you know, we'll go with Rodrigo. Rodrigo doesn't get anything. He doesn't
That's
get
true.
anything to go
Rodrigo
according
has
to
it
his
rough.
thing. He. I mean, like, I don't like that he's trying to ruin someone else's marriage, but he does truly, or not. I don't know if we can say truly, but he does love Desdemona. Doesn't get her. Tries a couple of methods. Doesn't work. Trusts Iago. Doesn't work out for him, and he does die, and it
Yeah.
almost seems like nobody really cared because when Desdemona died, Othello kills himself, and Emilia wants to be near her. Rodrigo just dies. He just let it
He's
go.
just dragged off into a corner. Nobody knows where he is.
That sucks, man. Like he's poor Rodrigo, dude.
Poor Rodrigo. I feel that, and he's there from the beginning. We see him all the way in scene 1. I said that the biggest victim was Cassio because he had no part in any of it, had no
Yeah.
concept of any of it. He was totally innocent of anything. And as far as he's concerned, I got drunk one night, made a couple bad choices, and my whole life has fallen apart. And so my best friend isn't my best friend anymore, and I don't know why, and I've been fired from my job. And so
Yeah,
I feel like Cassio, to me, is the biggest victim.
that's fair. That's fair.
Last question. How do you think this play should be taught in schools? Now, for me, I think this is the one that should be taught in schools. I don't know why we give young people Romeo and Juliet. For the life of me, I don't know why. I wish this was the one that was taught in schools because we do deal with racism and we need to talk about it, and it's often easier to talk about it through works of fiction than it is to talk about it on a first person level, or even a second or third person level. So I think that and that's the point really of fiction, is to articulate messages that are sometimes difficult for us to broach socially. And so I wish this was taught in schools, and I think that the best way to do it is to kind of break it down and ask these reflective questions, like we have today.
But you also argue that Iago wasn't doing this for racist means anyway. So how would you even describe this in a racist setting if you're trying to explain it to kids?
So one of the things that I think that we as Black people need to confront is historical post-traumatic stress disorder. And I feel like so many things that we feel may not reflect the reality of what's going on, but it's what we have been told by our parents and grandparents.
Yeah.
I just want to share two stories, two of my grandfathers, both of whom I love very, very much. Our paternal grandfather told us the story of when he was in the war, there was segregation in the camps, and the white soldiers would throw grenades at the black soldiers' camp. So that's one story that we heard when we were young. Dad may have told us that story, but we were young the first time we heard that story. I was young. I don't know if you were there. Whatever. I was young. The second story, from my maternal grandfather, the message of that story is you can't trust white men. The second story from that's the lesson. The second
That's
one,
what he's trying to tell us. Yeah, that's what he's trying to tell us.
right? Our maternal grandfather said to me, you were not here for this one. He said that his sister was raped with a baseball bat and left for dead in a field. And this was by a group of white men, and the police didn't care because she was a little colored girl. This was in Mississippi. And so both our grandfathers left the South to raise their children, our parents, in a better place, i.e. Chicago, in the North. And so if those are the only stories you're hearing from these people you love very much, these people you trust very much, of their time and their place, and then you are surrounded by other people who have those stories, you have a level of distrust for white men particularly that may not necessarily be founded in current reality. And then you see these things on the news, and it just reinforces what you've already been told, even though it may not reflect the totality of current reality. Now, we had the distinct privilege of going to a very diverse school. We were raised in a very diverse education system that I think was very much reflective of the country as a whole. We had white people and Black people and Hispanic people and Middle Eastern people and Asian people. We had immigrants. We had first generation. We had people that have been here for generations and generations, like our family has been. And so I think having that exposure to all sorts of people, of all sorts of backgrounds, with all sorts of stories, I can hear those stories from my grandfathers where the message is don't trust white men, but then I have my best friend's dad who treats me like one of his kids, who's a white man. And so then I can kind of determine what sorts of white men are trustworthy and what sorts of white men are not trustworthy. And you can learn to gauge differently than if you had just had your grandfather's stories and your best friend's grandfather's stories and their best friend's grandfather's stories that all reinforce each other, and the news who reinforces these fears. And so I think that there is a prejudice that we haven't fully dealt with, and we need to be able to say there are racists and they need to be handled accordingly, but they also need to be identified accordingly. Not all white men are racist, sexist pigs. There are some, but not all of them. And so I think when we can talk that through in a book like Othello, because we can say, the Duke is not a racist, sexist pig in this story. Cassio's not a racist, sexist pig in this story. Iago might be. Barbancio kind of is. And so what are the characteristics that we need to look for in people in our real world to say this person is not safe, but this person is, even though they meet the same demographic requirements? And that's reflected also upon white people. Not all Black people are going to shoot you, but that is the cultural idea that all Black men are dangerous. And that's obviously Not the case. I'm related to one who's perfectly sensible. So that's my position. That is my soapbox that I've just gotten on about how we should teach Othello in schools in a way that I think reflects reality, our current reality.
Yeah, I think that's very strong. I think that you gave a very valid point that um, eh, racism, prejudices, all of that, there are just certain people that hate, and that's just kind of how it is. And it's not necessarily white people hate or black people hate. It's just people hate, and they'll come in all shapes and sizes, any creed, any nationality, whatever. They're just going to be people that are just going to hate you for you, and you're never really going to be able to avoid that. But the thing is, you got to be able to see it and recognize it, and just not get involved in those types of people, and make sure that you're aware uh, of the possibility, but also that there are many people that are also just very good people. That you don't have to deal with the prejudices as much if you just kind of avoid people that are going to be like that.
And to extend that into current events is to say that these people who do bear these prejudices, they have no business being in civil service on any level at any point. These people have no business being police officers or firemen or teachers or senators or president. They have no business being in civil service because they've proven themselves that their prejudices are going to prevent them from doing their jobs effectively. And so knowing that, you can't just, I don't think we should dismantle the police. I think that's a bad idea. But I think that we should definitely remove the bad apples from the bunch and avoid putting more bad apples into the basket.
Yeah. I mean, just proper psychological training at the example of the police for one, the prejudices, but for two, being able to handle a crisis situation.
Yeah, high stress.
Yeah, just I don't think dismantling it is the right way to do it either, but there's definitely a way to make sure that we have the cops that can be trusted to keep their positions or even be promoted up.
Yeah, that would be even better.
As opposed to the ones that are, of course, going to shoot innocent people,
in the back.
7 times.
So that was my last question for you today. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to say?
I know you said, is Othello your favorite Shakespeare?
Othello's my favorite Shakespeare play, yes.
Okay. I definitely enjoyed it. I don't think it'd put it... I want to read Hamlet again. I gotta remind myself. Because Hamlet was my favorite before this, and I still feel like I'd probably say Hamlet, but I gotta read it again to double check here. I definitely liked Othello way better than Romeo and Juliet. I also liked it better than Macbeth. So Othello's probably second place for me, if I'm being honest.
We will definitely be reading Hamlet. So if you would like to see our evaluation of more Shakespeare plays, more of these discussions, and not just Shakespeare plays, next month we will be doing, what is it called? The Picture of Dorian Gray. The month after that, we will be doing 1984 by George Orwell, and then we will be doing Beowulf. So there will be more of these discussions, so please hit subscribe if you would like to see more of these discussions, and ding the bell. As I mentioned earlier, in the description box below, we will have some places where you can get t-shirts with fun Shakespeare quotes on them and other things. And also, there are some notes down there if you would like the Othello notes that I took. And... next question. What is the number one lesson you have learned from William Shakespeare's Othello?
Can you say yours? Because I got one, but I think I'm stealing yours if I say it.
Communication is the key to any happy relationship.
Oh, you said that way nicer than I did.
You should definitely not murder your wife.
I was just gonna say, just listen to your wife. That was what I was gonna say. Just listen to your wife. It's like, did you cheat on me? No. All right. Well, I guess I'm done with this conversation.
I'm glad we had this talk, friend.
Glad we had this talk.
That is solved. And then you get Iago back to Venice and say, listen, you are no longer my friend trying to separate my marriage.
Yeah. Communication is definitely key in this whole thing. And not even just with the relationships, but even with Cassio and I mean, Barbantia probably wouldn't have even gotten as upset if Desdemona was just honest with him right out the
That's
gate,
true.
too. So, like, everything in this is about communication, really.
It's all about communication. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me. As I said, our next discussion will be on Dorian Gray, and we will be doing that sometime in the month of October. So we will catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for being with us. Bye.
Bye.